Another round of peace talks this weekend between the U.S. and Iran looking increasingly likely. The U.S. president signaling but not confirming those negotiations could be held as they were last week in Pakistan. Donald Trump saying he's confident he will get a lasting deal before the current 14-day ceasefire runs out in the middle of next week. The same issues continue to divide the two sides. They include Iran's nuclear program, compensation for wartime damages, and passage through the Strait of Hormuz. 4 days into America launching its own retaliatory blockade. British and French leaders convening a meeting with some 40 countries to nail down how they can ensure freedom of navigation after the war. Donald Trump's confidence buoyed by pushing Israel and Lebanon to agree on a 10-day truce, issuing invitations to leaders from both these countries to talk at the White House. Meanwhile, celebrations in Lebanon as some of the 1.2 million people forced to leave their homes return, despite reports of continued shelling in parts of the country's south. Our correspondents tracking the latest developments for CNA, Toni Waterman from Washington, D.C., and Hira, Mustafa in Islamabad. Toni, let's start with you. Donald Trump very hopeful he will get his lasting deal by this weekend. What's the possibility of that, or these talks even happening at all in Pakistan?
Well, President Trump has signaled and has been very optimistic that these talks could resume as soon as this weekend, even going as far to say that he may go himself if an agreement is reached. Although I have to say there's been absolutely no indication so far in terms of scheduling or messaging from the White House that anybody is packing their bags and getting ready to jump on a flight. And in fact, the president is out in Arizona right now, where he's meant to be giving a high-profile speech later tonight. But the expectations that this second round of direct face-to-face negotiations is going to take place, especially after Lebanon and Israel agreed to this 10-day ceasefire just yesterday. And Iran had really said that there could be no further talks without this ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. So that was why we saw President Trump really amping up the pressure for that ceasefire to take hold. This current ceasefire, the one with Iran, is going to end next Tuesday into Wednesday. So this is really becoming one of the last opportunities for the two sides to sit down before that expires. Trump has indicated that the ceasefire extension is not going to be needed. So that suggests that he believes the deal is going to be reached before then. And of course, he has repeatedly been saying that this war is going to end soon. And he is looking for a diplomatic off-ramp as these consequences multiply and spread, threatening the global economy.
Hira, let's bring you in. You're in Islamabad. In fact, just last weekend, talks in Islamabad, which failed to secure a deal. If talks happen again this weekend, Pakistan, I take it, ready to do more diplomatic heavy lifting.
Well, absolutely. Pakistan is intensifying its diplomatic outreach to bring the warring parties, Iran and Washington, to close a peace deal. The country's army chief is currently in Tehran, and what we do know is that he has held several meetings with the Iranian leadership. That includes Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, as well as Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf. He has also held a meeting with Iran's military leadership to find a middle ground to resolve the issues regarding Iran's nuclear program, as well as the reopening of Strait of Hormuz. He's someone who's being viewed as a very powerful man in the country. He's someone who's in good terms with the current American-U.S. administration, and we have seen on multiple occasions that President Trump has praised him highly, calling him his favorite field marshal. So many in the country believe that he is going to be head over heels to bring both the warring parties on the table of diplomacy. Simultaneously, civilian leadership of the country is on a 4-day diplomatic tour to the Middle East. Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif has held meetings with the Saudi officials during this tour. He has also held meetings with the Qatari officials, and currently he's in Turkey and on the sidelines of Antalya Diplomacy Forum. He has held a meeting with the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, briefing him about Pakistan's ongoing mediation efforts. And of course, a statement coming in from the U.S. President Donald Trump that signaling that there is a possibility of a round 2 in Islamabad. So many analysts in the capital are telling us that this tells us that a lot of work has been done behind the scenes, and perhaps in the next few days we could see a major announcement.
Now, Toni, as Hira mentioned, that behind-the-scenes work by Pakistan to work on issue by issue so that the larger issue, so the end of war between the U.S. and Iran, that can be reached, a deal can be reached on that. And one of these issues, stopping the fight between Israel and Hezbollah. Now, the truce between Lebanon and Israel, that's barely a day in, already reports of possible violations of this 10-day truce.
Yeah, I mean, this is a 10-day ceasefire that was reached after a flurry of diplomatic calls, including the president speaking with leaders of both Lebanon and Israel, and both sides now agreeing to stop all offensive military operations by land, sea, and air. But the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that his forces are going to remain within this 10-kilometer buffer zone in southern Lebanon. Lebanese and Hezbollah officials telling citizens there not to return to their homes because there is the potential for the fighting to resume, although we saw people returning by the thousands, even though that somewhere around 40,000 homes have been bulldozed and more than 1 million people have been displaced. Hezbollah, which is the Iranian proxy, has not been included in these talks. It's released some vague statements on whether it's going to even abide by the ceasefire. It says it's not going to cease its strikes unless Israel's attacks stopped. So its fingers, it says, remain on the trigger. This seems to be holding for now, but there, as you have mentioned, have been a litany of bombardments leading up to the ceasefire being enacted. President Trump says he's going to invite both leaders to the White House in the next week or two, and that he may even go to Lebanon, in his words, at the right time, as he really tries to make sure this ceasefire holds so that the U.S. can progress in its peace talks with Iran.
All right, so 2 tracks for 2 ceasefires. Thanks to CNA's Toni Waterman in Washington, D.C. and Hira Mustafa in Islamabad.